great panel. And I'd like to drill down on that last question a little bit. It's been about a year now since the trade war officially started. Since China's practices affect everybody outside of China, has any country imposed a 301 type tariff on any Chinese product? Secondly, have you seen in your travels to China, when you're in the hotels and what have you, I'm getting reports that they're filled with European and TPP executives just working overtime to take over American business. And the third, and this is the acid test question, have we already ceded the Chinese market to our European and TPP trading partners?
I can answer at least part of it. I don't think we've seen any of our trading partners do 301-like actions because 301 was supposedly going away once the WTO was created. So I don't think our trading partners have those kinds of policies.
Has there been any tariffs?
Certainly other countries have put some tariffs on Chinese imports. I think it's mostly been through AD/CVD though, Scott. Does that sound right? Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the metal sector, I think it is true that there have been that there's been additional pushback from the EU, from Canada, and the agreement to lift the tariffs off of Canada and Mexico included a commitment to stop transshipment and to go after anti-dumping. So in the metal sector, that's true. 301, you're absolutely right. I don't know of any others, but that's I don't think that it's universally true about imposing additional tariffs because that has happened.
So just I'll go to the second question. So far this year, 2019, China has increased its imports of dairy products. That has not been from the United States. That has been from our competitors, the Europeans and the Kiwis. So they are definitely taking advantage of this trade dispute that we're having with China. And once you get market share in China, it's yours forever, right? So we're losing and losing to our biggest dairy competitors.
Yeah, so I was actually just in Bill's $1 million question. Where do we end up with all this? Just in China last week, very clear that our like-minded friends around the world are marketing themselves as the reliable trading partner. Americans are now the unreliable trading partner. I don't think we can, in our generation, can ever reverse that. I think we're stuck with that, and we'll never get back to normal in our trade relations with the Chinese in our generation. Sounds kind of grim, doesn't it?
That's all I have grandkids. I see a hand up here.
Brett Fortin with Inside U.S. Trade. To follow the theme, when we're talking about decoupling with China and the possibility that that's the administration's goal, we know there are some voices in the administration that believe that. At what point can we conclude that that is what the Trump administration wants and is moving toward? And at what point, if List 4 goes into effect, how long will it take for these tariffs to cause that? Or, as Bill had mentioned, has that already happened?
All right, give it another shot. So, decoupling is folly. We all know for economic reasons it's folly. We all know for broader geostrategic reasons it's risky. And I think there's a very active debate within the administration about this question. I know there are folks that want supply chains out of China. They just want to get them out of China. They can go to Vietnam, they can go to Mexico, they just want them out of China. There's other folks in the administration that want to bring them all back to the U.S. So those folks, I just think it's not realistic. It's just not going to happen. We don't have an economy where all those supply chains are just naturally going to come back here. We don't have the elements, the incentives, the focus on STEM education, immigration policies, just so many big things that are not in place to bring all those supply chains back.
And I'll just jump in and answer that just from the perspective of the apparel and footwear and travel goods industries. We've actually seen our members they've been diversifying out of China for years, and that process has accelerated. And I think Scott mentioned that this was sort of an accelerating concept here, but that's definitely occurring. And when you talk about those folks in the administration, I think President Trump is both those folks that wants to bring it to the U.S. and those folks that want to take it out of China but park it somewhere else. In fact, he tweeted that very concept. It was about a week and a half or so ago. So we look at this as sort of instructions from the administration is to move your supply chains out of China to where there's no direction, but move them out of China. That seems to be a pretty clear message that we're getting.
And I think to that point, there are policies out there that folks are exploring, you know, to provide that incentive to leave China. I think that there are certain value chains that are permanently existing in China, things like, you know, apparel and footwear, where 98% of the clothing and shoes that we buy here in the United States comes from abroad, and then 40% of that comes from China. I think that you have to create those incentives in other countries if you're going to move those supply chains where, you know, China has sort of that vertical dominance. But, you know, some of our executives went in to go meet with some administration officials, and they did throw back, you know, why don't you just move to Vietnam? Well, as if we weren't already there. And then we have this struggle where if we leave China, we are leaving some of our most dependable, long-standing suppliers that we've worked with, and you can surely bet that our competitors from Spain and Italy and Sweden and Japan are going to come right in behind us to take that share of that production. And when they're there, they're not going to leave. So that when these tariffs come off, we can't knock on their door and say, hey, by the way, we're back. Would you mind? Can we still produce in this factory? They're going to say, nope, we're good. You go back to Vietnam, you go back to Bangladesh, you go back to, you know, India, you go back to another country, wherever you're sourcing now as your alternative, and you're good there. But I don't see that apparel manufacturing, textile manufacturing, footwear manufacturing coming back to the United States.
Look over at this side of the room. Was there right in the middle here?
Hi, Don Phillips, Don A Corporation. Good to see all of you again. The question I have is this trade war strengthening the hardliners or strengthening the so-called reformers in China? I wondered if you might. The other thing is your thoughts on what happened. There was expectations you were very close to a deal, and then it seemed to fall apart. And I would appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Don. If you had asked me this question back in April, I would have told you that I thought that the pressure was successfully empowering the reformers to get some changes, and that I was pretty optimistic that we were, as a consequence, going to be able to say that the administration had achieved things that probably no previous administration had genuinely been able to achieve. I mean, the pressure was on. There was a recognition of the need to make some of these fundamental changes to take China's economy to the next level. I think that the aftermath of what happened in early May has likely strengthened the hands of those who are counter to a reform effort. How long that lasts, I don't know. It is among the concerning things, I would say, to how a couple of weeks ago transpired that we had not only List 3 being announced to go to 25%, then almost immediately List 4 hitting almost all other exports, and then whether coordinated or not, the executive order on Chinese technology, and then the adding of Huawei to the entities list. That combination of four things in roughly 4 days, I think probably did more to undermine what had been forward momentum on some of the trade negotiations than probably anything else. As for what happened, I can only speculate. What we have pieced together from our conversations with U.S. and Chinese officials is that they had made substantial progress. In competing news stories, and certainly depending on what you believe based on who leaked what and why, it appears that the U.S. had gotten some significant concessions from China, but was seeking more. It appears that at least some of those concessions were contentious within China's government. It appears there were also some things the United States were demanding that China felt that it simply could not accept, such as what happened to all of those tariffs that are in place. Were they in place for 6 months before any reduction? Were they in play? Did they come down immediately? When it comes right down to it, all of the issues that have surfaced so far are ones that I continue to believe that if the two sides are genuinely interested in negotiating a deal, that a deal is to be had here, particularly if the two presidents meet and decide that they want to have a deal. But it will require them both to make some concessions. You know, one wise negotiator once told me that the ultimate deal for everybody is everybody needs to be a little bit unhappy. I think there could be a deal here if everyone is a little bit unhappy with the outcome.
Hi, Marilee, International Trade Today. This question is for John. She noted the Huawei entities list. If that actually continues and is not softened, if there's not exclusions, how significant will that be for your industry? Like, what kind of sales losses would you have?
Yeah, I was waiting for that question. Thank you. First of all, there was some confusion about the impact on our industry when the news first broke last Monday. I was actually in Beijing at the time, and I did manage to get out. So the first news that came out, a lot of folks were reporting that the temporary general license, like the one that was issued for ZTE, only in name but not in substance, because in substance, while a lot of reporting was it gave U.S. industry, particularly semiconductor industry, a reprieve. It's basically no reprieve. There's almost no relief from that temporary general license. Just a couple of facts. Huawei is the world's biggest telecom equipment provider. It's the #2 cell phone provider, and it is the #3 customer for the semiconductor industry. So I'll just say it leaves a major hole for us, and I've said it publicly, is we would like the industry to better balance, the U.S. government to better balance its national security concerns with its economic security concerns. Anyone else want to try that one?
That's a good answer.
Let me pop back in there. So I got a question all the way in the back.
Thank you. This is Olivia Zhang, reporter with China's Caixin Media. So my question is also for John. As there has been recently some discussion about China restricting rare earths to the United States, I wonder what does that mean for the semiconductor industry and how, what can it really restrict industry? And secondly, there are also some people saying in the U.S. that U.S. should restrict the Chinese companies' IPO here. So how do you think of that possibility, and how worse it can go before it gets better in this bilateral relations? Thank you.
Yeah. So Ingmar Bergman wrote a great screenplay called "Scenes from a Marriage" many years ago. It ended up with a married couple on the floor of their living room after beating the crap out of each other, and finally decided it was finally over. So it can get a lot worse before it can get better. So sorry, another grim anecdote. So about the rare earths, I was actually again in China when the murmurs of this came out, and Xi Jinping paid a visit to a rare earth production site, and so I just don't know if that's posturing, if there's more to come. I do think that Newton's third law is relevant. I don't know why. I don't know how the Chinese sit quietly as our side puts more and more on the negotiating table. So I don't know if it's rare earths or if it's other things, but I do expect other shoes to drop.
And in the footwear industry, shoes being dropped is not a good thing. Yeah, there's a question over here.
Hi, my name is Conan. I'm from Ventures Trade, whose majority clients are from Africa. Thank you so much for sharing today. It's very informative, and thank you. And it's very interesting for a Chinese Buckeye to study here and stay here at this kind of tricky moments. And it's kind of also fortunate to hide in the blue Columbus out of the huge red Ohio. My question, however, is about Africa. I'm kind of curious about what's the implications on the tariff for the African countries, especially in the industry of mining, diamond, and natural resources. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there could be, I'll just tell you from my perspective, there could be a lot of dynamics. I mean, some people think that Africa might benefit because if you're putting tariffs on products coming out of China, then those products then move to other places, including Africa, which is duty-free right now. So that's one area where there might be some benefit. But a lot of those African investments are Chinese investments. And so do they then, does that interact and they pull back, or, there's some adverse impacts that come in because they're sort of circling the wagons on their own supply chains. I've heard a lot of analysis that it could kind of be either way. I'm not sure what the net is, but certainly disruptive in probably both good and bad ways. There's a question over here. Maybe, this might be our final question then.
Ellen Ferguson, CQ Roll Call. This is a little off the path, but trade has had such a high profile the last 2 years, and we're entering presidential elections. Do you see trade getting any kind of attention from candidates other than the president, because this has been a big part of his platform? Do you see any attention being paid to these issues as we go along, and especially if that fourth round of tariffs on Chinese imports takes effect?
Trade be political.
So it's a good question. There are a lot of issues that the candidates can focus on, so let's be clear about that. There's not a shortage of issues. But traditionally, and I'm someone who's studied this for a long time, I mean, trade as an issue in and of itself doesn't get a lot of resonance. And I say this is a trade wonk, which of course is disappointing. But it is often conflated with other issues, like how people are feeling about their economic situation, and what have you. I mean, you saw that there was kind of a backlash after NAFTA was passed to Democrats in 1994 that was combined with other issues. Clearly, for some Trump constituencies, some narrow Trump constituencies, and there are many of them, this is an important issue. And it's an important issue in some battleground states. So that's why I said at the outset that the president may find it in his interest to continue to beat his chest about China through the election, which is entirely possible. I don't know that, this is a hard issue in a debate, particularly with 20 candidates, to make a lot of sense out of. So I think you'll see a reaction to it, no doubt, given the laws of physics that we've just discussed. But when I think that it's also true that healthcare, how the economy's doing, and all of that is going to probably, at the end of the day, matter a whole lot more.
Yeah, just one thing. I just checked the markets. They're down 152 points, and they were down 250 points yesterday. I think the stock market is going to have potentially a major say on how this all plays out.
So speaking in my personal capacity as a former assistant USTR for congressional affairs, I would say that, looking at the administration's strategy overall on trade and whether or not they can deliver on this major trade priority for the president, which is congressional approval, ratification of the USMCA, it's really hard for me to imagine when we were doing TPA, when we were doing TPP, it was an administration-wide effort where we had stakeholders and business groups and NGOs and labor unions and folks all across the spectrum working towards one particular goal. And given the administration's just broad interest in trade, particularly tariffs, but also regionally, that they're negotiating a trade agreement with Japan and the EU and the UK. We've got this ratification thing. We took the steel and aluminum tariffs off of our trade major allies, but I think there's just so much going on in this administration. It's hard for me to really see that sort of whole government effort like we've seen in the past to get something like this done. And I think the tariffs on China in particular has really created I guess a diversion from being able to successfully achieve that goal. I think it's also really important to note that politically speaking, not just on the presidential candidate side, although some presidential candidates have repeated what I have said for a long time, which is tariffs are taxes that Americans pay, we are seeing more and more members of Congress do that as well. If you follow Twitter, if you follow the congressional hearings, the Small Business Committee has now spoken out on this, the Financial Services Committee has spoken out on this. And so you're increasingly seeing members on both sides of the aisle talk about how these tariffs are not going to be effectively the means to an end. In fact, if anything, they're encouraging the administration to resolve this issue as quickly as possible so that this doesn't become an election issue.
So we'll close up right now. The one comment I'll make, I think there's another physics law that generally is what goes up must come down. So hopefully if these tariffs are going up, that they will eventually come down. With that, if you can join me in thanking Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to our great panel. Having just one editorial comment, I was surfing last night on the television that was before the tariffs, and Kamala Harris was on, used the phrase "the tariffs are taxes" yesterday. But I will say, from other candidates I've listened to, they are not all very conversant yet in trade, but they're all being asked about it, I think, more than we ever saw before. Despite I know that there was a lot of downer talk and markets down, the sun is shining. It's a beautiful spring day outside. I hope everyone has a great day. I want to call out, we have a WIDA supporter, Trade Data Monitor, who helped support our conference earlier this year, and they have some information in the back on international trade and trade flows with China, and some great data on country and export and import numbers that if you want to pick up a sheet in the back, it's got some great information, and other people are here as well. With that, thanks to our panel, and thanks to all of you. We hope to see you again soon.